$700 an hour. $700 for this piece of garbage. Adrian Thorne's voice was a low growl, slicing through the opulent silence of his study. He slammed the test paper down on the mahogany desk, the red F seeming to bleed under the lamplight. I'm starting to think my bloodline ends with you, Leo, an 8-year-old who can't even do third-grade math. What a goddamn disappointment. Have you ever been made to feel that small? Like you were nothing more than a broken cog in a machine that demanded perfection? Before you hear how this story of quiet rebellion and hidden genius unfolds, do me a solid and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because you are not going to believe where this goes. 8-year-old Leo Thorne sat rigid in his leather chair, his shoulders hunched so tight they almost touched his ears. His small fingers gripped the cushioned armrests, his knuckles white, as if the pressure alone could keep him from shattering into a million pieces. He didn't cry. He'd learned years ago that tears were just another form of failure in his father's eyes. Adrian let out a long, disgusted breath. 5 failed math tests in a row, the most expensive tutors in Connecticut. And what do I get? Negative progress. If you can't pass this next exam, I'm done. No more baseball, no more video games. You will sit in this room until the numbers make sense. He turned, grabbing his tailored coat from a brass hook, and strode out of the room without a backward glance. Leo remained frozen, a statue carved from fear. Just outside, in the grand hallway, Clara Sanchez froze, too. Her hand was still on the handle of the industrial vacuum. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She was just on her way to clean the cavernous library. But every venomous word had found its mark, and now her heart ached with a pain that was horribly familiar. It wasn't pity. No, pity was for the fortunate. This was empathy, a deep, resonant understanding of what it felt like to be told your brain was wired wrong, that you were a failure when nobody had ever bothered to ask how you saw the world in the first place. She glanced down at her cleaning cart, the array of chemicals and rags a stark reminder of her place in this house. Then back toward the study, where the silence was now louder than the shouting had been. Later that afternoon, after Adrian had left for a 2-day business trip to Chicago, Clara found Leo in the solarium. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing around his defeated form. He was doodling in the margins of another pristine worksheet, drawing tiny, tangled mazes with no exit. "Hey," she said softly, her voice a stark contrast to his father's. He flinched. "I know I'm just the housekeeper," she continued, kneeling down so she wasn't towering over him. "But would you want to try a game?" Leo shrugged, his eyes still glued to the paper. "Does it have math?" "A little," she smiled, a warmth crinkling the corners of her eyes. "But with cookies." That made him look up. They cleared the ornate glass coffee table and laid out chocolate chip cookies in neat little rows. Clara showed him how addition was like building a cookie tower, how multiplication was like arranging squads of cookie soldiers. They laughed when she accidentally miscounted and had to eat the evidence. They made mistakes together, then they fixed them together. This wasn't a lesson. There was no pressure, no looming threat of failure. It was just discovery. Every afternoon for the next week, while Adrian was away, Clara and Leo held their secret lessons. They met at the sprawling kitchen island, in the quiet hum of the laundry room, and once huddled behind the massive ficus trees in the greenhouse. They used anything they could find: bottle caps, spare change, dried pasta from the pantry. They transformed abstract numbers into tangible things Leo could hold, could see, could understand, and slowly, something miraculous began to stir. The tangled mazes in his mind began to straighten into clear, open paths. He was getting it, He didn't just pass the next test, he aced it, then the one after that. By the third perfect score, his teacher called Adrian directly. "Whatever you're doing at home, Mr. Thorne, it's working. Leo is a different child." Adrian was baffled. There were no new tutors, no new study regimens. "Must be the pressure finally sinking in," he muttered into the phone, a swell of pride mixing with his confusion. Then came the Thursday he got home early. A meeting in the city had been canceled. The household staff wasn't expecting him. Clara certainly wasn't. She and Leo were sitting on the plush carpet of the reading nook, arranging flashcards shaped like slices of pizza. Leo was laughing, a sound so bright and pure it was almost foreign in that house, counting fractions aloud with a joy Clara hadn't seen on his face since she'd arrived. Adrian stopped dead in the doorway. "What the hell is going on here?" Leo froze mid-laugh. The pizza slice fell from his hand. Clara's heart plummeted into the pit of her stomach, cold and heavy. Adrian's face, usually a mask of stoic control, was twisted with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You're the housekeeper," he snarled, his eyes locking onto Clara. "Who gave you permission to teach my son?" I wasn't." Clara scrambled to her feet, her hands suddenly damp. "I just saw—" "You think this is appropriate?" His voice rose, echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "You went behind my back. You took my child and played school like he was your little pet project." "Mr. Thorne, please," she tried again, but her words were swallowed by his rage. Then a small voice cut through the tension. "She helped me." Leo was on his feet now, his small body trembling but his voice clear. "You said I was a disappointment, but she never did." Adrian looked down at his son, and for a fleeting second, the rage in his eyes fractured, revealing a fissure of pure confusion. "What?" "She taught me with cookies," Leo said, holding up one of the pizza flashcards like a shield. "And with drawings. She showed me it's not wrong to see things differently. I passed because of her." Adrian's gaze snapped back to Clara. She didn't flinch. She met his stare, her own expression a mix of fear and defiance. "I didn't plan it," she said quietly. "I just saw a boy who needed a different kind of help, and I knew how to give it to him, because I used to be him." A thick silence descended on the room. Adrian looked from the triumphant 95 on 100 worksheet Leo had proudly left on the floor to his son, who was standing taller than he had in years, and finally to Clara. For the first time, she didn't look like the help. She looked like someone who believed in something far more powerful than house rules and job descriptions. He didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Not when he stalked out of the room, not when Clara quietly returned to her duties. Not even when Leo, for the first time in months, said goodnight without being prompted. The next morning, however, Lucas walked into the kitchen as Clara was brewing coffee. He placed a large new whiteboard on the wall beside the breakfast nook. "If you're going to keep teaching my son," he said, his back still to her, "at least do it properly." Then he turned and handed her a pack of colored dry erase markers. Clara stared at the box, her heart hammering against her ribs. Was this a test? A trap? Adrian crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "You can continue helping him, under one condition." She nodded slowly, her throat tight. "Yes, sir." "You don't overstep," he stated, his voice flat and severe. "He is still my son. You are not a certified teacher, and I am not handing over his future to a housekeeper with good intentions. Keep it simple. Math only. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said, her voice a soft but steady whisper. "I understand." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked away, already pulling out his phone. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the box of markers. Inside were a dozen vibrant colors. She didn't smile, not yet. Not until she knew what this fragile truce truly meant. By mid-morning, she and Leo were setting up the new whiteboard. The sun filtered through the bay window, warm and gentle. "I think green should be for multiplying," Leo announced, his eyes bright with excitement. "It feels like things are growing." "Green it is," Clara said, and for the first time in that house, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Their first lesson under official, albeit strained, permission began. She kept the warmth, the safety, the praise. "You're doing great," she'd say, and Leo would beam, his confidence growing right along with the numbers on the board. The house felt different, not louder, but warmer, as if someone had turned up the thermostat on life itself. Still, Clara moved with a quiet caution. Every time she walked through the halls, she felt the invisible line her employer had drawn, the echo of his warning. Don't overstep. That afternoon, Adrien walked in as they were finishing a lesson. He didn't speak, just stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching. Leo, lost in his world of numbers, didn't notice. He proudly explained his tower of colored blocks, demonstrating his understanding of even and odd numbers. Adrien's eyes scanned the board, the blocks, the neatly stacked worksheets. He said nothing, but a flicker of something unreadable. Was it respect? Passed through his eyes before he turned and left as silently as he had come. That evening, the older head housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, stopped Clara in the hallway. "You've made an impression," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Clara raised an eyebrow. "The kind that either gets you fired," Mrs. Gable smirked, "or promoted to unofficial family. Be careful, girl." Later that night, as she headed to her small room above the garage, Clara found a folded note on the stair rail. It was written in Leo's clumsy, determined handwriting. "Thank you for the board. Today was fun. I like green now? L." She smiled at the piece of paper for a long time before slipping it into her pocket. That night, she didn't dream of the failures of her past or the warnings of her present. She dreamed of numbers floating like constellations, scattered and imperfect, but slowly, beautifully, coming together to form something whole. By the end of the week, the pristine whiteboard was a chaotic masterpiece of equations, colorful shapes, and Leo's proud little notes. "I got it," in vibrant green. "I hate fractions," in defiant red, next to a sad face. Every morning, Clara arrived early, crafting lessons disguised as grand adventures. They never called it studying. It was the snack shop challenge or the racetrack rally. But while the breakfast nook had become a sanctuary of learning and laughter, the rest of the grand house grew colder. Clara noticed it first in Mrs. Gable's polite but distant nods. Then the groundskeeper, Bernard, who usually had a morning joke for her, grew silent and tight-lipped whenever she passed. It wasn't long before she overheard the whispers, sharp and stinging, from the butler's pantry. "She's getting far too comfortable," Mrs. Gable's voice hissed. "Carter pays her to scrub floors, not play school teacher," Bernard added. "What happens if she messes him up for good? She's just the help." Clara froze outside the door, her spine turning to ice. The words weren't a surprise, but they landed like tiny shards of glass under her skin. She took a steadying breath, forced her shoulders to relax, and walked on. She'd heard worse. Still, that night, as she erased the board, her fingers lingered on the words Leo had scrawled in green. "I like numbers now." How long could this last? The next day, Leo looked up from a multiplication table and asked, "Why don't you have your own classroom, Clara? You're way better than my school teacher. You don't get mad when I mess up." Clara's heart did a slow, painful flip. She chose her words with care. Because, sweetie, not everyone gets the same chances. Sometimes, people get told they don't belong in places they were born to be in. That's dumb, Leo declared, with the simple clarity of a child. She chuckled, a sad, knowing sound. It is. His question echoed in her mind long after the lesson ended. Later, Adrian returned home early, his voice sharp with stress as he barked orders into his phone. He entered the breakfast nook just as Leo was explaining how he'd measured the living room using toy cars. Dad, I used your Porsche as 10 feet. Adrian blinked, momentarily thrown off by his son's infectious enthusiasm. His eyes flicked to Clara, and for a second, she braced for a reprimand. Instead, he just gave a curt nod. Good work. But as he turned to leave, she caught the faint crease in his brow. Not disapproval, but something closer to unease. That night, he called her into his study. Sit, he commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite his imposing desk. I've reviewed Leo's progress reports. His teacher says he's a different child, confident, curious. He paused, his gaze intense. They asked if we'd hired a professional. I told them no. He leaned back, his fingers steepling. I need to be clear. I appreciate the progress, but I also need boundaries. This isn't a teaching position. I cannot have the staff thinking there's a shift in hierarchy. Do you understand? Yes, she said, her voice calm despite the storm in her chest. I do. Good. Keep going. Just keep it quiet. Keep going, but stay invisible. The words were a gut punch. After she left, Clara walked out into the crisp night air of the garden. The Connecticut sky was a tapestry of sharp, cold stars. She thought of her mother in their tiny Louisiana home, teaching her multiplication with biscuits on the back porch because they couldn't afford tutors. Her mother, who never finished college but who taught Clara that kindness was a form of division. The more you gave away, the more everyone had. Maybe I'm not a miracle worker, Clara whispered to the wind. But maybe I'm the right person for this one moment. And with that thought, she walked back inside, quiet but steady as the North Star. Now, I have to pause here and ask you guys, what would you do in Clara's shoes right now? Keep quiet and protect the boy, or speak up for your own worth. Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you're hooked on this story. The following Monday morning, a new energy buzzed through the Thorne estate. Leo bounded down the main staircase, clutching his latest math test. A brilliant, glowing red 98 circled at the top. Look, he yelled, waving it like an Olympic medal. Clara took it from him, a theatrical whistle escaping her lips. Well, now that's just 2 points shy of perfect. You've always been smart, she whispered, hugging him tight. Now you're just seeing it too. Adrian entered, glancing up from his phone. What's all the shouting? Leo rushed over, shoving the test in his father's face. A slow, thin but genuine smile spread across Adrian's lips. Well, I suppose that calls for a reward. Let's take a trip this weekend. Just you and me. New York City. We'll see a show. Leo's eyes went wide. Really? You've earned it. Clara watched from the background, a swell of pride in her chest mixed with something else, a sudden, sharp pang of distance. She was the architect of this success, but she wouldn't be attending the celebration. That night, as the house settled into a deep silence, Leo padded into the kitchen in his pajamas. He was holding an unopened, sleek black box. Earlier that day, a courier had delivered it, a brand-new tablet, preloaded with the most advanced math apps money could buy. A card had been attached. To Leo. Tututoma, for your hard work. Keep it up. Dad. Can I give this to someone else? He asked quietly. Clara looked up from wiping the counters. Why? It's a wonderful gift. It's cool, he admitted. But I'd rather keep learning with cookies. Her heart melted. "It's your gift, sweetie. You do what feels right." He smiled, then asked, "Can we use the bottle caps tomorrow for fractions?" "You bet." As she turned out the lights, Maya felt the weight of the day settle into her bones. It wasn't exhaustion, but a knowing, a certainty that change always comes with resistance, but that one little boy now believed in himself because someone had dared to believe in him first. And for tonight, that was more than enough. The following weeks were a delicate dance on a tightrope. Legally, nothing had changed, but emotionally, the entire household had been rearranged. One evening, after their hidden lesson in the laundry room, Leo asked, "Why don't we just tell my dad we're still doing this?" "Because, sweetie," Clara said, her voice soft, "sometimes adults have to make complicated choices to keep the peace, even when it doesn't feel fair." "But careful feels like lying," he whispered. A beat of silence passed. "I don't want to go back to being stupid." "You were never stupid," Clara said, her voice fierce with conviction. "You were just waiting for someone to speak your language, and you found it." 3 mornings later, the fragile peace shattered. Clara was polishing the banister on the 2nd floor when she heard raised voices from Adrian's study. One was his, controlled, clipped. The second was a woman's, sharp, cold, and dripping with disdain. "I have every right to know what is happening under this roof, Adrian. Ethan's progress is being handled." "Handled? The school told me a maid has been acting as his private tutor." "A maid, Adrian!" There was a heavy pause. "She's not just a maid," Adrian said, his voice lower. Clara's hand froze mid-swipe. "Oh, so now she's what? Part of the family?" The woman scoffed. "You should have hired a professional, not a charity case." Clara backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't want to hear any more. The next day, a courier delivered a thick envelope from the prestigious Blackwood Academy, a school known for its rigorous entrance exam. A note from Adrian was attached. Placement assessment. If he passes, he's eligible for the spring term. Please administer privately. It was a test, not just for Leo, but for her. They sat together in the quiet laundry room, the scent of fresh linen their only companion. The problems were complex, twisted, designed to weed out all but the most exceptional. Twice, Leo froze, muttering, "I can't." "You've solved harder things than this with pasta and bottle caps," Clara whispered, her voice a lifeline. "Just breathe." 2 hours later, it was done. The house held its breath for 3 long days. Then, on Friday morning, Adrian called them both into the study. He stood by the window, his back to them, a letter in his hand. "They called last night," he said, his voice strained. "The results are in." He turned, his expression unreadable. He passed, placed 2 full-grade levels ahead in mathematical reasoning. Leo's jaw dropped. Clara felt a tear trace a hot path down her cheek. "They offered him a spot, spring enrollment, with a scholarship." "That means I can go?" Leo gasped, looking at Clara. Adrian nodded. But as Leo let out a whoop of pure joy, Adrian raised a hand. "Before we celebrate, there's something you both should know. His mother is pushing for joint custody again. This result strengthens her case. She may try to move him to another school, in another state." The joy in the room evaporated. Later, on the back porch, Leo rested his head on Clara's shoulder. "Will you still help me?" he asked, his voice small. "If I have to leave." "Always," she whispered, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "No matter where you go." Because she hadn't just taught him math. She had taught him courage, and there was no test score in the world that could measure that. The custody hearing was colder than she expected. The air in the courtroom was sterile, smelling of old paper and anxiety. Adrian sat ramrod straight. Camille, his ex-wife, sat across the aisle, looking flawless and formidable. The judge, a stern woman with eyes that missed nothing, listened as Camille's lawyer painted a picture of educational neglect, highlighting the fact that Leo's only tutor was a household employee with no formal qualifications. When Lucas's attorney finished his defense, the judge looked over her glasses. "I'd like to hear from Miss Sanchez directly." Clara's heart pounded as she walked to the witness stand. The judge's questions were direct. "Why did you intervene?" "Because he was hurting," Clara said, her voice clear and steady. "He thought he wasn't smart enough to learn. I just saw a boy who needed someone to see him, not just his test scores." Camille's lawyer stood. "But you are not a teacher, are you?" Clara didn't flinch. She met his gaze. "No, I've never had a degree on my wall. But I have taught a child how to believe in himself again. Does that count?" The final question came from the judge. "Why did you keep teaching him, even when you were told to operate in secret, to effectively hide your influence?" Clara took a breath and looked at Leo, whose small face was filled with worry. "Because the heart doesn't check credentials before it decides to care." A hush fell over the courtroom. The gavel struck. The next morning, the judge gave her ruling. The request for joint custody was denied. Expanded visitation was granted, but Leo was to remain with his father, his education to continue on its current, successful trajectory. The judge looked directly at Clara. "While the law may not grant you a formal title, Miss Sanchez, this court recognizes your contribution. Consider pursuing certification. You have a gift." Outside, in the bright sunlight, Leo wrapped his arms around her waist. "You were brave," he whispered. "You made me brave," she whispered back. Later, over celebratory pancakes at a local diner, Adrian slid an envelope across the table. It was a brochure for an online teaching credential program at a state university. "If you're willing," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft, "I'd like to fund your training, your certification, whatever path you choose." He paused. Leo isn't the only one here with a future worth investing in. That night, for the first time, Maya sat at her small desk and opened a browser to a new world. The journey was daunting. Exams, fieldwork, navigating a system that wasn't built for someone starting in a laundry room. But she remembered the boy who now saw numbers not as enemies, but as friends. Her first virtual class was a sea of unfamiliar faces, aspiring educators from every walk of life. When they were asked to share their teaching philosophies, Clara spoke about her experience. "I believe learning happens when someone says, 'I see you,' before they say, 'Open to page 83. I teach from laundry rooms because sometimes that's where the heart listens loudest." Her story resonated. She wasn't just a student. She was a testament to the idea that the best teachers aren't always found in classrooms. Adrian, true to his word, expanded their work. Together, they started a weekend math clinic at a local community center for underserved kids, for the other Leos of the world who had been told they were broken. They called it the Bridge Builders Workshop. Clara, now a credentialed intern, knelt on the worn gymnasium floor, using chalk and colored blocks to build the same bridges of confidence she had built for Leo. One afternoon, months later, as the California sun streamed into her room, she received the email. Preliminary credential issued. She closed her eyes, tears of gratitude stinging her eyes. It was real. She was a teacher. The final scene of this chapter isn't in a courtroom or a classroom. It's in the backyard, where Adrian and Leo have built a small playhouse, painted in bright, sunny colors. It's a space they built together, a symbol of their new foundation. Clara arrives home from her student teaching, exhausted but exhilarated, and finds a small, hand-painted sign above the door. The bridge. Est with cookies. One evening, her final credential, the official, embossed paper, hangs framed on her wall, right next to a crayon drawing of a rainbow bridge that Leo made for her. The journey was complete, the temporary status behind her. She had crossed her own bridge, from housekeeper to educator, from silent helper to community leader. As she tucks Leo into bed, he looks up at her, his eyes shining in the soft lamplight. "Teacher," he says sleepily, "my bridge feels real now." "It's real because you built it," she whispers, kissing his forehead. He yawns and snuggles into his pillows. "Can we build another one tomorrow?" She smiles, her heart so full it feels like it might burst. Always. This story reminds us that the greatest transformations often begin not with a bang, but with a whisper, with quiet acts of faith in unseen corners. It teaches us that a true education isn't about degrees or titles, but about courage, resilience, and the willingness to see the potential in others and in ourselves. Have you ever had a Clara in your life? Someone who saw you when no one else did? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content that celebrates the quiet heroes who change the world, one heart at a time. Thank you for watching.